Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, June 15th, 2015, halfway through the month here, just a couple of weeks away from Independence Day. And I want you to spend these next couple of weeks thinking what that means, Independence Day. What drove the American colonists to kick out the government back then, because we seem to be in a repeat of much of those evils outlined in the Declaration of Independence. Today happens to be the 800th anniversary of the signing of the Magna Carta. And, of course, King John didn't abide by that agreement, tried to murder the nobles who had written it, brought in foreign troops to do it. And what's interesting, a little side note, most people don't know, Pope Innocent declared the charter null and void and formally absolved King John of any obligation to obey it, said it's null and void, it's against the will of God, and you can go on out and kill all the people who tried to force you to surrender your God-given right to rule as a despot. This is a repeating pattern. Both in the government refusing to abide by its commitments, because we're going through that with the U.S. government and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, but also Pope Leo XIII, when he became Pope in 1878, declared the Bill of Rights should never have been written, because God does not give to man freedom of thought, action, and speech. You will do as the church tells you to do. By the way, you're not using that small boy for the next couple of hours, are you? All righty, phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, the U.S. earlier today conducted a counter-terrorism airstrike in Libya, but they aren't sure about the result. They think they may have killed an al-Qaeda leader. The only thing they're really certain of is they bombed something. There was a big bang and a lot of smoke, so the bomb actually did go off. That's about the only thing they're really sure of. And they're turning into the gang who can't shoot straight, because over on LiveLeak they've got another article about how the American Air Force has bombed the Iraqi armor for the Iraqi army, supposedly on our side against ISIS, for the third time this month. Really is getting a little ridiculous out there. Now, as you know, the United Nations is getting ready to release their report on the war crimes committed last summer by Israel and by Hamas. And they looked into Hamas war crimes only because Israel threw a tantrum. But the early word out is the report really does show that Israel was overwhelmingly breaking international law, killing children. As we all know, Israel, of course, exonerates itself. Oh, yes, it was okay for our guys to shell those kids playing soccer on the beach. Absolutely. And they're out there trying to declare that the Gaza conflict was a moral war. It was moral. It was the right thing to do. It was done in accordance with all the available laws. And Israel is trying to sell this idea that if something is the law, that makes it moral. Okay, well, you know, everything the Nazis did was the letter of the law. In Germany, are you going to tell me that made it moral and the right thing to do? I don't think so. Now, Tel Aviv is lobbying the United Nations right now not to release their report. It's just going to, fuel those anti-Semite Jew haters. Really, it's just a complete waste of time to put that report out there. Now nobody wants to report it. Meanwhile, Israel is flooding all of the other United Nations missions in New York with their own reports, saying this was right, this was good, it's the Palestinians are bad, we are great, our feces are not odoriferous, and it's actually provoked complaints from some of these other UN missions who are saying that Israel's version of what happened is a tissue of lies, complete fabrication. They're insulted, first of all, that Israel would lie to them. Second, they're insulted that Israel apparently thought it was going to work. And so Israel is out there trying to get ahead of the UN's report. They're basically what they want to have happen in their wet dream is. The UN report is never released, and history is written by the report Israel has put out there. Okay? And Israel's position is the 2014 attack on Gaza was unfortunate, but it was lawful. And Israel has fallen into the same mindset as Hillary. They're thinking like lawyers to evade their crimes. But ordinary people, including those who are deciding whether or not to buy Israeli products at the supermarket, they're not lawyers. They don't think like lawyers. And politics is perception. And in this day and age, people have very little confidence in the official version of anything. They don't give it a lot of weight. It used to be that if this was the official declaration of the government, well, everybody would just go along like that was true. Those days are gone. We know that pretty much everything coming out under the stamp of officialdom is crud. And Israel is losing the PR war, despite all of the funding and megaphonies they're putting into it, chasing bloggers around the net, hurling insults and epithets at them. And going even one step further, Israel is lobbying the United Nations to redefine what genocide means. And what they want is genocide to mean what happens to the Jewish people, theoretically, during World War II, but not what's being done to Israel's neighbors, like the Palestinians. Oh, that's not really a genocide. They're going to change the definition so that they can go on saying, we're not committing genocide, we're not apartheid, we're not doing any. That was the Nazis did all that stuff here. Meanwhile, a video has surfaced about Israeli forces running over a youth after shooting him in the back. And Israel wonders why world opinion is turning against them when this stuff comes on out. Now, as you know, Netanyahu and Sheldon Adelson and Chaim Saban are pulling together a huge financial resource with which to wage war against the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. It is now estimated that the BDS movement is costing Israel's economy somewhere between $3 and $4 billion a year. And Israel's money junkies are not happy about that. And Israel's attitude is, we're going to do what we're going to do, but you're not supposed to complain about it. You're not supposed to protest us. And boycotts are a form of peaceful protest protected by the First Amendment. But of course, Israel, like all those popes, don't think the Bill of Rights should have ever been created, because you're not supposed to have freedom of speech. You're just supposed to do as you're told here. Now, Israel has just announced they're going to seize a chunk of Syria to create a buffer safety zone for the Druze people. Okay? Now, the Israelis could care less about the Druze. This is just an excuse for Israel to annex another piece of Syria, because that's Israel's idea of Middle East peace. We want a piece of that, we want a piece of that, we want a piece of that, we're going to take all of that. Over in Global Research up in Canada, they have a banner headline, Congress and Israel aim to sabotage the Iran nuclear deal. Magnificent grasp of the obvious. We've kind of already knew all of that. But it is starting to spread out there that the opposition to the Iran deal is coming from a very small minority, the government of Israel and those members of the U.S. Congress who are working for Israel and not for you, the American people. Something to keep in mind during next year's elections. Now, as part of their efforts to sabotage the P5+1, in addition to adding a lot of new requirements that were never there in the first place, the U.S. government is now claiming that Iran has started backing the Taliban in Afghanistan, even though up until now Iran has been supporting the U.S. puppet government under Hamid Karzai and his successor. And the U.S. is out there, they're supporting the Taliban, they're bad, they're evil, they're on the other side. And the propaganda is just hit the flood stage. We will be back after these words from our sponsors. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And, of course, Jeb Bush is on the TV right now announcing he's running for president in 2016. And the corporate media is acting like this is big headline news, breaking story. Jeb will run for president. We've known he was going to run for president for over a year. It's all advertising and product placement, and we're not buying. Because with Bush, you get war. Actually, with all these candidates, you get war. Have you noticed that yet? There isn't a single candidate in the race for the White House who's not out there screaming, war, war, and more war. We've got to have lots of war, big wars. Because they need something to distract you from the fact that they've absolutely destroyed the nation's economy. Speaking of economy, over in Ukraine, Kiev is out of money. Period. End of discussion. They are unable to repay their private lenders. They have no money. They can't pay for their gas for Russia. So what does the IMF do? They loan them more money. Wow. Don't you wish you could get that same deal from your credit card companies? Maxed out the card, can't make the payments. It's okay, we'll just loan you some more. Quite a contrast with how the IMF has been treating the poor people of Greece, isn't it? And of course, we know what's really going on. They're saying, well, Ukraine needs the money to complete their economic restructuring, meaning enforced austerity. No, they're basically financing Kiev's war against the eastern Ukraine in the hope that it will provoke a confrontation with Russia, because that's what they really want. Now, speaking of Russia, they have extended their agreement with Cyprus to use Cypriot naval ports for their warships, despite the European Union saying, you can't do that. Yeah, they can, and they did. Remember, when Cyprus was in their own economic trouble, Russia came back and renegotiated the money that Cyprus owed Russia, cut the interest rate, wrote off part of it, extended the payments to make things easier for Cyprus, and Cyprus is responding, as opposed to the methods we are seeing from the money junkies in Europe and the U.S. to pile the debt on until the whole system collapses. I think our entire financial system is living in a fantasy land. They desperately cling to the official pronouncements about the unemployment rate, so they can go and say, there's plenty of jobs out there. You should be working. You should be buying what we're selling. Why aren't you? The only thing wrong with the economy is you people here. More about that in a little bit here. Russia has finally responded to all of this NATO posturing and war games and the U.S. storing heavy weapons in Europe, saying that this does look like NATO and the U.S. are getting ready for a war with Russia. And General Yuri Yakubov is basically saying Russia is left with no other option but to fortify its defenses on its western flank, on their side of the border, which is their right to do. And over in Washington, D.C., in the Pentagon, the champagne corks are popping. Yee-haw, we got the Cold War back. We'll be able to loot those American people for all kinds of money for high-tech weapons, and it doesn't matter if they don't work or not, because we're just getting hugely rich off of this whole deal. The U.S. government misses the Cold War of the 1950s and 1960s. All they had to do was wag commies at us, and we were conditioned to soil ourselves and say, oh, please, Mr. U.S. government, save us from the evil commies. We'd give them our money and the lives of our children for all these proxy wars, which turned out not to be about protecting the U.S. or spreading democracy, but imposing U.S. puppet rule on nation after nation after nation after nation. And they missed that Cold War mentality. They missed the fact that they could just go booga booga, commies at us, and we would just shudder in fear and do as we're told. And they seem to think that if they can get a conflict with Russia and or China going, a new Cold War, that will go back to that mindset. It is not going to happen, because we understand that is exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to create a new enemy out of Russia and China so they can wag them at us and say, see, the Chinese are going to get you. The Russians are going to get you if you don't do what we tell you to do, if you don't give us your money and your children's lives. It's right out of 1984. Emmanuel Goldstein. You have to have an enemy to scare your people with. For the U.S., it is becoming Russia and China because nobody was buying Al-Qaeda or ISIS. Israel basically sells the idea the entire world is against Israel, which is not too far from the truth, to keep their people under control. All tyrants have to have an enemy that they can use to scare their people into obedience, and that's exactly what's going on with Russia and China. Now then, The corporate media has been using a group called the Iraq Body Count, a supposedly independent anti-war group monitoring Iraq war casualties going all the way back to 2003. Well, as it turns out, a document has been released showing that this supposed independent anti-war group is actually funded by government agencies complicit in the Iraq war. The funding goes back at least till 2009. And basically, the data is being rigged. They're undercounting deaths because they know the American people are concerned about not only our people being killed, but the Iraqi people being killed. And the Pentagon relies on IBC's data to legitimize their violence against the people of Iraq. Now, over in Germany, one of their daily newspapers is saying that the IMF intentionally torpedoed the European Commission proposal on the Greek debt. It was a bailout deal that was supposedly going to avoid a default because they want Greece in default so that they can go on in there and basically strip mine all of the assets at pennies on the euro, as it were. And again, it underscores the difference in how the IMF is handling Greece versus Kiev. Kiev is broke. They can't make payments on the money they owe. IMF's going to loan them a whole bunch more. Another story coming out of Zero Hedge. Deutsche Bank, which as you know has been hit with several scandals and is seeing their top executives head for the hills, is starting to show many of the same symptoms that Lehman Brothers did back in 2007 and 2008. And Deutsche Bank could be the next Lehman Brothers collapse. So we have to keep an eye on that here. Now, despite, we're coming up on a commercial break. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back talking more about the economy. Well, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the economy. And by the way, getting on back to the fact that today is the 800th anniversary of the signing of the Magna Carta. When you look at the text of the Magna Carta in most textbooks, it is incomplete. Little bit of hidden history. There were two sections, sections 10 and 11, which dealt with the evils of usury and actually imposed strict restrictions on how much money moneylenders could make from the people of Britain. And somehow, over the intervening centuries, copies made of the Magna Carta, those two sections get left out. It's just like here in the United States of America. When the Federal Reserve was founded, our public schools stopped teaching about King George III's Currency Act as being the prime cause of the American Revolution. They don't want you to know about these things. But it was in the Magna Carta that usury was harmful to the nation, and it had to be brought under control. But you're not supposed to know that. Alrighty, getting on back to more current events. The Russian sanctions, which are causing tremendous harm to Europe and other places, have loopholes. Because apparently the Russian oil company Rosneft and British Petroleum are free to go ahead on a $700 million deal for British Petroleum to acquire a 20% interest in the Taz-Yurak-Siberian oil field. They're planning on announcing the deal this week at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. The sanctions are only for little tiny people, not the big corporations. They're above the law, as it were. Alrighty, article out of Wall Street on Parade. Treasury reveals what J.P. Morgan was really doing with the London whale trades. And they're sounding an alert here because the U.S. Treasury set up the Office of Financial Research under the Dodd-Frank financial reform legislation to try and prevent another 2008 crash from happening again. Last week they issued a report saying that a 2008-style crash is possible and that regulators will be blindsided again. And it says right now the big Wall Street banks are propping up their cash reserves almost solely with these opaque and very dangerous capital relief trades. Wall Street can't make money in this economy any more than you can. That's why there is so much fraud going on. It's the only thing keeping them afloat. And there's nothing new about that. I think it was about a year and a half, 2 years ago. Magazine did a survey on Wall Street, asking Wall Street traders and executives, how often do you commit fraud? 25% of them were very honest and said, yeah, we have to commit fraud. It's our job. We're told to commit fraud. If we weren't committing fraud, we would have gone out of business long ago. Now, Texas, as you know, just passed a law, and it's been signed by the governor, that will authorize the construction of a gold and silver bullion depository in the state of Texas. As soon as it is complete, Texas is going to demand their $1 billion worth of bullion from the Federal Reserve in New York to be sent down to the new facility. The law includes a provision saying that that gold may not be confiscated by the federal government under any terms. Now, first of all, to Texans, good luck getting your gold back from the New York Federal Reserve. It may not be there. More and more nations around the world are starting to talk about repatriation. The U.S. government's not going to be able to hold them all off. And certainly they have no justification at the New York Federal Reserve to refuse to allow Texas to reacquire their bullion, because it is their bullion. Story out of safehaven.com. I referred to this obliquely a little bit earlier in the show. The article's title is Consumers Not Following Orders. And basically it's going into the fact the first quarter numbers were abysmal. They tried to blame it all on the cold weather. People were staying home. They weren't shopping. During cold weather, you buy sweaters, blankets, hot chocolate, chains for the car, snow tires, whatever. But they were blaming the low consumer numbers on the cold weather. Well, we're into summer now. And in 2 weeks, it's the end of the second quarter. And so far, it doesn't look like the consumer spending numbers are moving upward. And they don't have an excuse to blame it on. People are going to look at the low numbers and say, well, yeah, the economy's heading back into recession. If it ever actually got out, we never really recovered from 2008. All we've had is an endless stream of propaganda pieces in the news about, oh, the economy's on the way up. The economy is doing good. The unemployment numbers are only 6%, all of which we know are absolute lies. And what the Wall Street money junkies are all out there saying is the problem is you consumers are not buying enough stuff. You have to buy stuff. We made it to fail, so you buy a new one. And actually, a lot of people, when their products are failing, they're just learning to live without them. We don't have money to buy anything. And contrary to the propaganda coming out of the U.S. government, there are no jobs out here. The real unemployment rate in this country is close to 40%. And that's just a hard reality. Now, apparently, according to a survey by Bloomberg, the trend of Americans buying stuff has just registered its largest collapse since 2008. After the Christmas shopping season, everybody slowed down. People aren't buying things. They're deferring. They're not getting new cars. As products wear out, they throw them away and they learn to live without them. Prior to 2008, 60% of our national economy was consumer spending, and we've lost that. And Wall Street can sit up there and scream about, you people aren't buying it. We're going to have to pass laws to make you buy things like vaccines. We scored a win on that one. We're going to make you buy vaccines. We're going to make you buy little earpieces for your wireless phone so that you don't get a traffic ticket. We're going to make you buy this, and we're going to make you buy that. Do you know during the Depression of the 1930s, there was actually a law proposed in Congress to mandate product obsolescence, that when you bought something like a washing machine, there would be an expiration date on it. And if you were caught using that product after its expiration date, even if the product was still working perfectly, you would be fined. To stimulate the economy. In other words, to flog more money out of the American people. But that system breaks down because we, the American people, don't have any money left. It's all been taxed away from us, interested away from us, outright seized by the police. The whole strategy for saving the economy after 2008 was to take trillions and trillions of dollars away from the American people and give it to Wall Street so Wall Street could loan it back to us at interest, which is a sweet deal for Wall Street, and it didn't work because the American people didn't want to go deeper into debt at this particular time, with the economy looking as shaky as it was. So the Wall Street bankers just wrote themselves huge bonuses and put the money in their pocket. And they're still in trouble, and they're still out there screaming, we need another bailout. We need to force people to buy things. And none of them will work in the long run. Going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And we're going to go right to the phones here. We've got a couple of callers waiting. John in Barbados. Aloha. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind? John, are you there? Okay, we're going to put John...
Hi, Mike.
Are you,
Mike.
okay, there you are. Got to pay attention to these things.
I was just grabbing a coffee. Sorry about
All right.
that. Anyway, I've just been looking at this nonsense between Russia and America, and apparently not only are Russia moving heavy weaponry, but nuclear weaponry into Kaliningrad, Belarus, and Crimea. Now, these nations are well into Europe. They're not too far to the east. I mean, you know, talking about trying to surround Russia, Russia seems to have enclaves all over the place. Cyprus, for another one. And apparently Armenia, where they have a huge Russian base in Armenia.
Well, why shouldn't Russia have bases around the world the same way the U.S. does? I mean, there's a little bit of a double standard and hypocrisy there. I would like to live in a world in which no nation feels they have to have garrisons all over the globe the way the U.S. does. But, you know, Russia's made it very, very clear. They are responding to provocations by NATO and the United States. And obviously, Putin can't just sit there and hope it's all a giant bluff by the U.S. and NATO. He's got to basically take steps to protect himself. Now, we don't know that the weapons Russia is prepositioning are nuclear. Frankly, they don't need to do that because they do have intercontinental ballistic missiles. But certainly they're prepositioning conventional weapons against a possible incursion across their border, and that is just common sense.
The other thing I wanted to mention is that according to now the latest reports, there's a huge push by the Syrian army and its allies into these border towns that have been being supplied by various nations outside, and it looks like they're going to be cutting off, apart from the airdrops from courtesy of the U.S. Air Force, these ISIS Takfiris from their weapons supply.
Well, that's cutting off the lines of communication, lines of supply. That's well-worn, well-known tactic. It makes perfect sense. It is their country. They're allowed to cut off the roads and borders anytime they feel like it.
Yeah. I mean, what amazes me is, like, when a nation like Syria or Yemen start fighting back and making gains, the UN steps in and tries to form a peace solution. We have to negotiate. But it's only when the oppressed nations fight back and start to win that the UN steps in.
Yeah, and the UN basically goes in and reasserts the puppet rulership. I mean, I'm hard-pressed to find a single time where the United Nations has gone into a country where the government has been kicked out and said, we got to bring back the original government because that was the last legitimate elected government. They never do that. They always put together a transitional government, and then they have new elections that are horribly rigged and fraudulent in order to put the puppet rulers back in.
Yeah, as for the Magna Carta, yes, you're quite right. Actually, those sections that you were talking about that being omitted in many textbooks, actually sets the limit of usury at anything above 6%. And if somebody gets caught, they are charged with triple that amount of interest to repay.
Well, one of the other things that was in there that made a great deal of sense was that if a member of the nobility was killed, his family were not liable for his debt, which I think was common sense. And, it is kind of interesting because the government of Great Britain is just as terrified of their Israeli infiltrators as the U.S. and Canada is, and so you literally have the British government concealing from their own people the true content of what they consider to be one of their historical founding documents. The British look at the Magna Carta the way we look at the Declaration of Independence. And we know governments play game with that. Look at how they messed around with the 13th Amendment in the Constitution. There was original 13th Amendment saying that no politician could receive any kind of honor, award, or emolument from a foreign government, and that one just sort of vanished when they came up with the current 13th Amendment about involuntary servitude, which is why you have all these American politicians going over to Israel to get the Friend of Israel Award and Defender of the Peace Award and all the rest of that stuff. And our founding fathers didn't want that to be out there because they knew that politicians are just as easy to bribe with fame and awards as they are with cash.
Well, I've been looking at some economic data going back to 2008, and what appears to have happened is that recession hit quite hard, and then it's plateaued for some time. But it looks like the indications are that we're going into a massive double dip. And this second dip will be...
We have to, because they didn't actually correct any of the fundamental problems. They've just been papering it all over, emphasis on the paper, since then. Anyway, John, I got to let you go. We've got another caller waiting I want to get to before the news break.
Okay. Bye, Michael.
All right, bye-bye. Thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over here to Ron in Missouri. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I'm off topic, I know. But I was wondering, this might be innocent enough, but if any of your listeners have seen this, from a reliable third party, he was in a town, Columbia, Missouri, last week, and in a closed Walmart, in the parking lot, it was swarming full of government vehicles, he told me. The Department of Homeland Security vehicles. Mm-hmm. So it struck me as kind of odd.
Well, they're having this massive training exercise all over the country right now, Jade Helm, and it's already underway, and so far no dissidents are being rounded up or anything. And I think it is a combination of training to deal with civil uprisings, and I think the military involved because they need to be retrained away from counterinsurgency back to being able to handle a frontal war against a military peer. Because the Pentagon admits that aspect of their training has been neglected for well over 15 years, because the U.S. Army has been acting like the Roman legions. Their job is to basically just slap down those rebellious provinces. And now that we're talking about actually trying to get into a possible war with Russia and China, our military have been trained to do the wrong thing. And I think part of Jade Helm, the part that involves the Army, is about retraining them to be able to coordinate movement across large areas of terrain and not get lost in the process.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm going to let you go now.
All right. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call coming up here on the top of the hour. Now, as you know, there was a lot of confusion over the fast-track vote last week, where it was actually announced fast-track is dead, it's gone away, and it turned out that was not accurate. And I think the media was putting out fast track was dead to discourage people from calling up and harassing their members of Congress over the weekend, because there were actually two separate bills. One was the fast track bill. That actually did pass, but it cannot go into effect until this trade assistance bill to help all the Americans they know are going to lose their jobs when this treaty passes. And that one failed, but they're going to do another vote on it tomorrow. And if that passes, then both bills can go to Obama's desk for a signature, and he's basically off and running. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't feel that I have any obligation to comply with a trade treaty that is negotiated completely in secret to the point where members of Congress who were allowed to read the legislation had to sign a non-disclosure agreement that they wouldn't leak it to the press or the public. Some of them did anyway, by the way. But, I mean, secrecy is the beginning of tyranny. And obviously, if it is that secret, this is not a trade agreement that is going to work for the benefit of the American people and the American workers. And another clue to that reality, story out of Observer.com, foreign governments have been paying former Senate leaders to act as lobbyists to go up to the Congress to sell the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Obviously, large multinational corporations want this thing to go through. It is not for your benefit. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. We've got a caller waiting on the line I'm going to get to in a minute, but apparently in the world, according to Fox News, there is absolutely nothing going on right now except Jeb Bush declaring that he will run for president. They did mention the shark attack briefly over the commercial break here. But it's kind of interesting. There's a little exercise I like to do every once in a while, and I suggest you do the same. When you see a politician on TV, speechifying, turn the volume all the way down. Forget what they're saying and just watch their face and body language. And just go with a gut feeling on what you're seeing. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. We're going to go with Janet in Florida. Aloha, Janet. Long time no hear from. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Mike. I have two separate items that I would like to mention to you, and I would like your take on them. Earlier today, I heard on the Internet Jim Willey talking on a radio show. Don't ask me the radio show because I don't even recall. But one of the things that he mentioned was that John Kerry's accident in Paris on a bicycle was not so, that in fact he was shot. Two bullets in the heart area, and he's now in Washington, D.C. in a hospital in very bad condition. I don't know if you've heard that.
I've heard it, and again, I'm wondering why they would cover that up. Okay, because, I guess depending on...
everything up.
Well, yeah, okay, listen, before you get off into, la-la land here, and I go through this argument all the time with the people who insist there wasn't a plane at the Pentagon. Can the government lie and cover things up? Of course. But why would they do it? That's the missing piece. Why? Okay? And, but I have heard that. I'm not going to rule out that that's what actually happened. Certainly it took him out of the machinations for the P5+1, and that obviously works toward Israel's interest. And if Israel took a shot at John Kerry, well then obviously the U.S. government would in fact cover that up. In fact, that's the only scenario in which I can make any sense about somebody trying to assassinate John Kerry and it being covered up, just the way they covered up Israel's attack on the USS Liberty. And,
right.
But again,
well, he went on to say it was done by ISIS. That's all I know.
Oh, come on. All right. Well,
I know.
Yeah.
Well, he's kind of crazy anyhow, don't you think?
Well, and again, we don't know who ISIS is really working for. We think they're working for the U.S. government. But again, What would the reason for ISIS be to kill John Kerry when he's out there trying to basically get this deal to help the Iranian people? And so it really is just becoming very, very confusing. And at this point, I'm relegating it to side issue. Okay, you had one more thing you wanted to talk about.
I have another one, and this regards this announcement that's hitting a lot of sites about a cashless society by the banks.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to remind people about a great man who passed away in 2007, Aaron Russo. And in his video, and you can pick up 10 minutes of it, or you can pick up the whole video of 1 hour and 35 seconds, where he's talking about the relationship that he had with the Rockefeller family. They had contacted him and wanted to meet with him. And he had met several times over dinner with Nick Rockefeller. And what they talked about was a cashless society and imprinting all of us in order to control the American people.
Well, not just the American people, the people of the.
That.
Yeah, it's called America from Freedom to Fascism. I highly recommend people see that video if you have not already. The idea of a cashless society, the goal of that is, of course, that all of the wealth is in the banks. You never actually have your own money in your control. Your little plastic card just moves it from one bank to the other. That would, here in the United States, provide an instant $1.3 trillion boost to their cash reserves so they can go on playing their little fractional reserve gaming. But there are certainly interests who would be opposed to a cashless society, including organized crime, which still has a lot of influence in the U.S. government.
Exactly.
The CIA's drug running operation would collapse if there wasn't any cash. And the bottom line, I don't think we're going to see a cashless society, because what would politicians tuck into the G-strings of all those strippers?
I don't know, but I want to mention this. In a credit union here where I live, and I've belonged to them for years, the last time I was there and I wanted to make a deposit of like $1,000, because I withdraw money and I like to keep cash.
Yes.
Anyhow, I wanted to make this $1,000 deposit back into my checking account, and the woman, perhaps she was wearing a brown shirt, I don't recall, but she said, "Where did you get this money?" Just like that.
Mm-hmm.
What would you have done under those circumstances? I mean, this is my money, mine, that I get from a pension and Social Security, Mike.
Well, that probably would have been a very good answer, but, you know, the reality is the federal government now has rules out there that bank tellers are supposed to ask you if you withdraw too much from your account, if you put too much in at one time, they're going to say, where did this come from? And if your answer does not please them, they can refuse the transaction and they file a report. And
yeah, well, I had every withdrawal slip in my hand. I was ready for her. It's right from my own account. Here, look at it. Pull it up on your computer. The other thing I want to mention is that when my mother passed away in 2012, and her estate was settled, I got a very large check from one of my sisters who was in charge of all of that out of Pennsylvania. And that night, I went and deposited it at the credit union, and that night, I got a call from the credit union asking me, where did the money come from and who was this person that gave you this check? Yeah. To me, I don't care what, it's fascism. It's control of the people.
It is, because, you know, those little plastic cards are plugged into the government's computers. They want to know that you are buying things they approve of. You know, they want to shut down things like garage sales, because when people buy used goods from garage sales, then they're not going down to the shopping mall and buying brand new junk. It really is, it's about control, because they're in a panic. Their little 11th marble fantasy is falling apart. And nobody has the guts to stand up and say, the problem all goes back to, all of these problems go back to private central banks issuing the public currencies alone at interest. Nobody has the courage to stand up and say that. So they're just trying to figure out some way to keep the system going forward a little bit longer. They don't want to admit that John Maynard Keynes was absolutely flat out wrong, and they knew he was wrong when he first came up with his theory. It's just that they have this John Maynard Keynes, he's an award-winning economist, and he says it's okay for us to do this and it'll work out really well. And it was just a big pile of, you know, economic bovine excrement. And again, they're trying to find a way. Basically what they're trying to do is duct tape that hole in the bottom of the Titanic. Right. And they're going to use your duct tape to do it.
when this financial crisis comes, and it is coming.
Yes.
And we are faced with the militarized police and the military, because Obama never reinstated posse comitatus. What happens when we lose our money? Don't the police and the military lose their money? Wouldn't that be a wake-up call for those people?
I would certainly hope that they would. We got to take a break for commercials. We got more callers waiting online when we come on back after these few words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. The phone lines are really loading up, so we're going to go ahead and get some phone calls out of the way here, and we're going to talk to Eric in California. Aloha, Eric. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to get some recommendations on some history books and stuff. I mean, I do most of my research on the computer, but, sometimes it's good just to get an actual book and, more condensed into one area. I mean, the only major book I've read is People's History of the United States, which I thought was really good, but, some stuff where he was mistaken about, like Pearl Harbor, he made it like there was no knowledge, and in 9/11, he pretty much goes by the standard stuff. But overall, I thought it was good. So I was just wondering maybe something more generalized or for world history. I know it's hard to get something all in one book, but
because there's so much of it. I think about
go ahead.
About 2-3 weeks ago, we had an author who has a book out. It's a very good book. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the title, and I can't look at it because I've already given it away. And
was that the book? I know you had a guy on. I think it was called. Hold on a second. Hidden History.
Yeah, that was it. That was it. Hidden History. That's a very good book, and it focuses on American history. We're starting to see books that are coming out that are telling the truth about what's been happening in this country over the last couple of decades. But again, 99% of published paper books are vetted either by corporate interests or the government before they ever see the rack. And in your brick and mortar stores, and even then, the sales staff at the bookstore exercises point of sale censorship. I remember years and years ago when I was still living in Southern California, and I was getting involved in the early men's movement to try and counter some of that all men are rapists crap we were getting from the feminists. And I went into a bookstore trying to find another copy of Who Stole Feminism by Christine Hobbs Summers, and she's a feminist herself, and she was writing about how what started as a movement about equality got hijacked into this, rape hysteria, male bashing stuff, and the lady at the counter just kept, no, you don't want to read that book. You don't want to read that book. I'm not going to tell you where it is, blah, blah, blah. So, you're better off being on the internet and doing your searches and keeping a skeptical eye, because the war for the minds of America has moved away from old traditional publishing broadcast, and it's now here on the net. They're spending huge amounts of money trying to co-opt or compromise the history that's here on the net. But again, if you go to the official site for the Magna Carta in Great Britain, it doesn't have those additional clauses about usury. You have to go out on the internet to find that. Officialdom is just nothing but lots. I mean, again, going back to George Orwell, where Winston Smith's job was to change the historical realities to support the current political agenda. That's what they've done to the Magna Carta. Winston Smith went out and he took those sections out of the Magna Carta that would be offensive to the private central bankers.
It's interesting what you were just saying about when you went to that bookstore, because I just listened to an interview yesterday that Brian Dawson put on his site between Allison Weir and Jeff Blankfort, and she was saying she can get her book on Amazon against our better judgment, but you can't get it on actually in the bookstore itself.
Yeah.
Have you read that? Is that a good one? I was thinking.
No, I haven't read that one. Like you, I tend to do most of my work here online with various articles and things. Anyway, listen, Eric, good luck. I need to let you go. We got a bunch of calls to get through here, and I'm going to switch over here to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. The woman who called, take your money all out of your savings account. Just keep enough in your checking. As soon as you get money, direct deposit or whatever into the bank, they own that money. You're an unsecured creditor. When are people going to understand that? That's Federal Reserve note. They own your money. You're just borrowing it.
That's exactly right.
You want to get out of the system. You take the money out of your savings account, get gold and silver, physical, bury it, hide it, whatever you got to do, and just keep enough in a checking to pay your bills. That is it.
That is it. You've got to minimize your exposure to the government and the money junkies. That's just common sense right now, where they've already stolen savings accounts in Cyprus. The European Union is mandating rules for all the European Union banks by, I think it's the end of next month, where they can do the same thing. They're already getting ready to do it here in the U.S. Wake up and smell the red ink. They are going to solve their self-made economic collapse by looting you. Remember what we said over at the coffee mug in our store. The last official act of any government is to loot the nation. That's what's going on right now. Your money is not safe in the banks. It is most exposed and at risk in the banks right now.
And to the enemy of the banks, besides American people, or a percentage of, is gold and silver. That is an enemy of the dollar, or physical or fiat currency.
Sound currency is always the enemy of fiat currencies, and that's exactly what it comes down to. They've been running this fraudulent, fractional reserve, debt-based banking scam on the planet for 300 years. Look how much pain and suffering and war it has caused, and still they want to keep on going because they want to own it all. Their model is the idea that they own all the money and you are merely borrowing it at interest. Usury, usury is the law of the land.
Well, would you put your money, give your money, like your savings account, to your next door neighbors? They're not going to give you any interest on it. So why the heck would you keep it at a bank? You don't even know the people, and you're getting like no interest on it. It doesn't make sense. Why would you keep money in a savings account and get no interest on it? That's stupid.
Well, because it's safe there, and the bank, the robbers won't come into your home and take it. Well, banks get robbed, and the easiest way to rob a bank is to actually own one. But you're absolutely right. People are just going along with what they've been told to do ever since childhood. But we've got to stop playing this game by the rules the money junkies made up to make themselves rich. Remember, banking is not a science. It is a religion. It's an arbitrary set of rules made up to benefit the bankers that we are all taught to believe is the way the world is supposed to be. And it isn't. We all have to become private central banking heretics. We need to delink from the system. And physical silver and gold is a legitimate way to do it. Okay, Dustin?
Be your own bank. Be your own bank, people.
Absolutely.
Be your own bank.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, we're going to let you go, and we're going to try and grab Mark in North Carolina for the remaining part of this segment. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Mike, I just wanted to say that I think people like us, people what I consider the Patriots movement, real Patriots, not the phony flag waving idiots. We should start calling other talk shows like I did today, and getting our message through. I called on Sirius. It's called the Mike Church Show, but it wasn't Mike Church. Mike Church is basically a good guy. It's some guy named Tom Basili. And, I start saying, I don't know, I don't know why you're giving out the neocon line. You're betraying the guy you're substituting for. And, then I said, Putin's actually a good guy. He's not we're trying to start wars with him.
Okay. Mark, we got to take a break for commercials, but you're absolutely right. Everybody listening to this broadcast has to start calling the other talk shows on the corporate media, try and get past the screeners and get the message out there. If we just sit here talking with ourselves, we're not accomplishing anything. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And one of our listeners just emailed me the article referred to by the earlier caller where Jim Willie is out there with the story that John Kerry did not break his leg, that he was shot. The bullet was very close to his heart. He's in critical condition. But apparently there was a little bit of a misstatement before, because the Jim Willie story is saying Kerry was meeting with ISIS when he was shot, which would indicate somebody else that didn't want him meeting with ISIS or getting the P5+1 through pulled the trigger, if in fact this did happen. I wish we could rule it out, but unfortunately there's been too many weird things about this whole story, including the flying back of Kerry to the U.S. rather than have have his broken leg supposedly treated there locally. So who knows what the heck is going on over there. Now then, finishing up on the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Trade Assistance Act, where the U.S. government is basically saying, yeah, more of you are going to lose your jobs when we sign this trade deal. You know, small price to pay for the most progressive trade agreement in history. And apparently the Republicans are pushing, along with looting the Medicare fund to pay for all this, they want to hike taxes on small businesses in order to fund Obama trade. This is nothing but a giveaway to large multinational corporations. Bans on GMO labeling, bans on all kinds of labeling, drive the small businesses out of business. It's the rise of the corporate state here. By the way, the FDA recently announced they were going to go after what are called artisan soap makers, people who have small shops that make old-fashioned handmade soap with flower odors and stuff in there, and we have a lot of them here in Hawaii. The idea being that the FDA couldn't guarantee these soaps were actually safe and good for you, even though they're made out of all natural ingredients, while the FDA blesses these soap products that come from large corporations, which contain toxic chemicals. My wife and I went through that with her joint pain, and it turned out there's a class of preservatives, formaldehyde precursors, that she reacts to. But even if you don't react to formaldehyde, it is a carcinogen. But the FDA says that's approved for your use. But these natural soaps that don't have any of these additives, they're going to have to slap down on. Now we're hearing that the FDA is going to start coming down hard on artisan food makers, little small shops that make cheeses or sour creams or meat or whatever. And they call it artisanal to make it sound like this is just somebody's hobby and you shouldn't be taking them seriously anyway. But technically, microbrewers are artisanal beer makers. But they want to come down on those because, by golly, you will go to the store and you will be dependent on the large corporations because they are the only ones whose products are approved for the use of the American people, no matter how toxic they are. Now, not too long ago, France got into serious trouble by accepting money from Russia to build some ships for them, the Mistral helicopter carrier. And Russia went to France to get these built in the spirit of international commerce, and because France does have a very high-tech shipbuilding capability. And then the U.S. pressured France to cancel the deal, led to all kinds of diplomatic upset, all of which was blamed on Russia. You don't need to be buying helicopter carriers. We need to give those to Israel or something like that. Well, France has been trying to find some way out of this because they don't want to be enemies of Russia. They don't want to have to pay a huge fine over and above refunding all that money to Russia because they basically broke the contract, and the U.S. isn't stepping in with any help. So here we're getting a solution. France's Dassault, the company that was building the Mistrals, is going to provide Russia with the systems and software where they can build their own Mistral, primarily the 3D visualization and modeling tools. Now, this is a classic case of hoisting with your own petard, because instead of Russia simply getting these Mistral ships, as a result of U.S. interference, Russia is now going to get not only the ability to build their own Mistral ships, but a major boost to their domestic shipbuilding technology, because they're not going to stop using these tools and software when they complete the Mistral ships. This is a gift from France to Russia's shipbuilding industry. And this is definitely a case of the U.S. charging in like a bull to accomplish an immediate foreign policy objective of let's just annoy Russia a little bit more, and it backflashes on them. Down in Bolivia, their leader, Evo Morales, is out there lecturing the European Union that it is time for them to stop being subservient to either the IMF or the U.S. He's telling them, grow some spine, like the South American countries are doing, and just say, look, we're going to go our own way. You want war with Russia? Fine, just go around us. Don't involve us. And everybody wants the IMF to be gone. Now, as you have seen on TV, especially on Fox News all day, Jeb Bush has declared his 2016 campaign for president. He's the 11th GOP candidate to declare, and now the presumed front runner. And apparently, people are just as dismissive and ridiculing of his campaign logo as they were of Hillary's. They do seem to lack imagination, and I know why. They got to come up with a logo that doesn't offend anybody, that can't be misinterpreted or construed or somehow used in a negative way. And as a result, they come up with these bland logos that don't really seem to say much of anything. It's very unimaginative. Now, Hillary Clinton, in response to Jeb Bush's big media fest today, is relaunching her campaign. You know, wasn't enough that she's announced her candidacy, she's going to re-announce it. We're relaunching the campaign. We're getting on out there. And Russia's foreign ministry is basically out there saying that Hillary is running for president on her promises to protect Americans from traditional threats like Russia and a rising China, all of which, you know, basically is political speech-making from the last century during the original Cold War. I will protect you from the commies. I'll protect you from the chinks. I'll do this. And Hillary is trying to replay that card. And I think Hillary is seriously misjudging the electorate because very few Americans genuinely think Russia is a problem or China is a problem. Only the bankers do. And in a further indication of serious disconnect and utter disregard for the intelligence and memories of the American people, Clinton's campaign manager is now out there saying that, in point of fact, there are no polls that show voters don't trust Hillary. This was all over the news last week, and he's out there saying, no, there are no polls like that. They don't exist whatsoever. There are no polls that say that. So, of course, we ran a poll on my website. Do you trust Hillary Clinton? 98% no. So, wrong again, campaign manager. We got to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. America, welcome back to the show here. Now, speaking of the Hillary Clinton campaign, her rallies are starting to look like Amway gatherings. Apparently, she was over at Roosevelt Island, and her entire pitch to the audience was to sell official campaign merchandise, and you got the buttons and the coolers and the rest of it. And some people kind of thought it was a little bit weird because Hillary's out there. She's the woman's candidate. She wants equality for women. And yet her campaign store is selling a style of undershirt called the wife beater, which is kind of weird. But it's got the logo on it, and she's just out there hawking all of this stuff. And, of course, you're allowed to use your EBT cards at the event. So Hillary is actually getting people to spend their food assistance money on campaign souvenirs, and so forth and so on. Now, Lindsey Graham is just out there trying to prove that he is the most bloodthirsty, extreme pro-war candidate out there, saying that military leaders need to be fired if they don't support his plan for a new war in Iraq. And, Lindsey, you're not the president yet. You've got about a year and a half to go. He's already out there saying, anybody that doesn't want to go out there and kill Iraqis. And, okay, comment in the chat room about Lindsey Graham, which is not repeatable on the air here. All right, Fox News has quit talking about Jeb Bush's candidacy. We all know he's running. We've known it was coming all along. It's all theater piece here. And they're moving on to this Rachel Dolezal situation. Now, she, up until just recently, was a leader of the NAACP over, and I think it was Washington State. And everybody was out there. I mean, she's basically portrayed herself as a black person for many, many, many years, and it came out the last week that, in point of fact, she's actually white. Parents are white, her childhood photos are white, and everybody's saying, how could she do this? It discredits the NAACP. And I can imagine how she got into doing this, because back when they were doing affirmative action and all the rest of that, a lot of people trying to go to school and everything realized that if they pretended to be some kind of a minority, there were more scholarships to be had. They'd cut you even more slack on your grades. I mean, there were a lot of benefits to being seen as a member of a minority. And a lot of people did fake that, like Geraldo Rivera. And so now she has resigned, and her problems may not be over, because apparently her brother is facing charges for sex assault on a child over in Colorado. 4 felony counts of child sex assault by this lady's brother. Boy, when it rains, it pours here. Now then, interestingly enough, over in New York City, they were having the Human Rights Watch International Film Festival. And they are premiering a film by a Palestinian filmmaker, Amr Shamali. But he won't be there. Israel's government has declared him a security threat, and Israel would not allow him to travel to Jerusalem in order to obtain a U.S. visa. Then he went to Amman, Jordan, where the U.S. approved a visa, but said, oh, our visa machine is broken. We can't let you on the airplane. Now, Shamali has previously attended half a dozen European film festivals without incident, and his film has drawn international acclaim. So, apparently, just so that you understand the rules the tyrants have set forth, apparently, when Pamela Geller goes out and intentionally insults Muslims all day long, that's freedom of speech protected by the First Amendment. But when a Palestinian filmmaker makes a film about how Israel treats the Palestinians, he cannot be allowed to come into the U.S. to attend the showing of his own film. Oh, that's hate speech. It's Jew hate. It's anti-Semitism here. Meanwhile, up in Switzerland, there's an exhibition of Breaking the Silence. This is a non-governmental organization which presents anonymous testimonies by IDF soldiers who are reporting on IDF misdeeds, such as happened last summer. And this exhibit was scheduled to open in Zurich, and apparently Israel's up there screaming, don't you dare let this go on! Don't you dare open this up! So Israel's support for freedom of speech is only freedom for their speech, Pamela Geller's speech. The rest of you just shut the heck up, as it were. Now, Gilad Atzmon was interviewed on Press TV talking about the situation over at the University of Illinois, and Stephen Saleta, who was basically kicked out of his teaching position for private comments he made on his own time online criticizing Israel's actions in Gaza last summer. And the American Association of University Professors have condemned this dismissal against the principle of academic freedom. This is a major official censure by this group. And the university's chancellor has reacted saying, okay, this is going to have repercussions because it can affect their academic standing, their accreditation. And this oversight group is absolutely right. kicking Stephen Saleta out to please their Jewish donors is not in the best interest of academic freedom of inquiry. Obama is out there asking for 6 more months of NSA bulk surveillance collection because we we missed who it was who phoned in those bomb threats to the White House that cleared the press room but left the first family sitting exactly where they were here. Apparently, a former Guantanamo prisoner who was invited to address a conference on youth radicalization in Montreal said he was prevented from boarding a flight in France to Montreal because the aircraft would have flown through U.S. airspace, and he's on the no-fly list. And you know what is really the irony about this? This guy, Murad Ben-Chalali, is an outspoken critic of radicalization. He's out there telling Muslims around the world, do not get involved in these groups. We have to stay peaceful. We can't join Al-Qaeda. He's out there working for peace. And he was kicked off a plane flight from France to Montreal because it crossed over U.S. territory at some point. And because he's on the U.S. no-fly list, oh my goodness, we can't do that. It's not even an American airline. This is one of the good guys out there, and he's on the no-fly list. Now, as you know, there was a story last week screaming about how TSA missed 73 workers on the terror watch list. There were 73 people working at the airport who were on the terror watch list. Oh, my goodness, how could this have happened? And TSA's out there saying, well, we need more money. We need bigger budgets and to keep these people off here. But they're missing the important point. 73 people on the terror watch list were working at airports where they could have carried out attacks, sabotage, smuggled bombs and weapons onto aircraft. None of them did so. Not one. These 73 people on the terror watch list just went to do their jobs, did what they were told as best as they could, took their paychecks, and went home. The scandal isn't that TSA allowed these 73 people on the terror watch list to get jobs. It's that the terror watch list, like so many other products of the federal government, is a total joke and a waste of taxpayer money. The majority of people on the terror watch list are in fact not terrorists. These 73 airport workers prove it. It's just another way to threaten people. Don't misbehave, I'll put you on the terror watch list. I'll put you on the no-fly list. You'll never go anywhere ever again. I didn't do anything wrong. Doesn't matter. I just don't like the way you look. All right, we got to take a break for commercials. We got a caller waiting on the line when we get back after our news break. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. We've had a caller waiting over the news break. Lenny in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I have a question pertaining to the France-Russia deal. Now, I know that you just reported a few minutes back, that France had agreed to give Russia the technology to build their own ships, but does the $1.3 billion that Russia had already paid for, or the $3.1 billion, I'm not sure if it's 1.3 or 3.1, that Russia had already paid for the ships to be made and delivered to Russia, was the money delivered back to Russia also with the technology?
I don't know the financial ramifications here. I'm sure Dassault is not just giving these tools to Russia, but it may have been a case of we'll take some of the money that you gave us to pay for this stuff, we'll refund the rest, and you just you write off any claims for the violation of the contract. I don't know the financial numbers, but what's really significant is the net result. The U.S. getting in and interfering with France and Russia's deal has resulted in Russia acquiring some very sophisticated shipbuilding technology that they did not have before. And it's another reminder that people in Washington, D.C., they're just thinking about the next news break, the next talking point, and they'll do these harebrained ideas without really thinking them all the way through to possible outcomes. And that's why we get blowback after blowback after blowback on all of these issues.
Well, science has long discovered that every decision we make, even though we think it's carefully planned out, is all made from the emotional system, the emotional part of the brain, the limbic system. So every thought that we make, even though we want to think that it was well planned out, is emotional. We just construct a false reality around the emotion to try and justify the decision that was made.
That's true to an extent. They call it confirmation bias or decision support, and certainly we've seen a lot of that in the machinations in the Human Cause Global Warming group. But there are people who are basically capable of making objective analysis because they're not personally, emotionally, or financially invested in the outcome, and those are really the best people to be making these kind of decisions. They don't have a financial interest. That's why pharmaceutical companies are supposed to use double-blind studies to run the decision-making process through people who have no connection to the outcome, may not even know what the ultimate outcome is actually going to be. We need that kind of decision-making support in politics, but we don't get it. I would certainly say that you are correct in terms of the money junkies and the people in Washington, D.C. They just want what they want, and they're going to come up with any rationale for it. Look at Bush's decision to go into Iraq. Well, we'll just tell them they've got nuclear weapons.
Correct. And that's one of the things. Now, the other thing that's already caused France is that India was going to buy the French warplanes. And as a result, India decided to stick with the BRICS nations side of economic power and decided to purchase the Russian warplanes instead of the French warplanes as a result of that minstrel ship deal.
Yeah, that's another way that France got hammered on this whole situation. Nobody is going to be contracting with France for military hardware because of the possibility that the U.S. is going to come in and simply say, don't deliver.
Correct. Now, I want to give you three names to another subject you just spoke of right before you went to news break, and I want you to tell me if these names mean anything to you. 1, Mary White Ovington. Number 2, William English Walling. And number 3, Henry Moscovitz. Do these names mean anything to you?
I'm afraid not. Without the context, I'm not sure. What are we talking about here?
Well, we're talking about the lady who claimed to be white and being the head of the local chapter of the NAACP up in Spokane. Mm-hmm. Correct?
Correct.
So, well, these people were the founding members of the NAACP, and none of them were black.
Well, the issue isn't whether or not the NAACP had a white or black person. The scandal is that this woman was pretending to be a minority when she was not. And again, as I pointed out, this is actually very common for people. In fact, one of the reasons that whole birther thing took off for Barack Obama is that he declared himself a foreign student when he was going to college because it opened up additional scholarships and advantages to him that people born in the United States did not have available to them. With all this giveaway to the illegal immigrants, I'm sure there's probably some people running around right now pretending to be illegal immigrants even though they were born in this country, because they see it as just something they got to do to get that edge over other people. I remember many years ago when I was working for the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and I almost lost the job I was in because they needed a minority hire for affirmative action, and it was actually suggested to me that I claimed that my name Rivero was that I was Hispanic, that I was first generation across the border, and I wasn't going to do that. I wound up keeping my job anyway, but I mean, there's a tremendous amount of pressure on people to pretend to be one of these privileged minorities because it gets them better treatment than ordinary American citizens.
No, I actually believe that she believed in what she was doing. I have no problem with that. My problem is, it's like I was discussing with a so-called black educator over the weekend, is that the NAACP didn't have its first black president until 1975. So I don't understand what all the fuss is about her.
No, the fuss about yeah, I see what you're saying, but the fuss about her isn't that she was in the NAACP. It's that she was pretending to be something she was not. And it didn't appear to be for a noble purpose. I mean, we've seen a lot of white people pretend to be black for a week or two for the purposes of a TV documentary or an article about how black people are treated. But this lady lived most of her life pretending to be black. And that's the scandal, in that inherently she is not somebody who is trustworthy.
Yeah, I understand that part, but what I'm trying to say is that I don't understand the uproar from the people of the black community. In fact, do you know who passed for being white for the longest? And it just come to light that he was half black as Jerry Hoover.
Yeah, well, look at Michael Jackson. You know, I mean, I actually worked with him on one of his videos when he was still young and black, and look how, you know, but that was for entertainment purposes. The issue here is the fact that, yeah, and nobody is saying J. Edgar Hoover is a good guy. In fact, quite the contrary. He was a real jerk. All right, so Lenny...
He hated blacks and he hated gays, but still he was both. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that was his self-hate coming out.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay,
yeah.
But this has nothing to do with NAACP. This has to do with the fact that this woman was pretending to be something that she wasn't and using it for either personal or political gain, and now, of course, it's all coming apart around her. So, Lenny, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. We're coming up on a commercial break here. Story coming out of Colombia. Apparently, U.S. soldiers down in Colombia between 2003 and 2007 as part of the drug interdiction efforts, meaning shutting down the competing drug lords and supporting those who are friendly with the CIA, apparently raped at least 54 Colombian children, but because of the agreement signed between the two governments, they cannot be arrested, charged, or prosecuted. Winning the hearts and minds, I guess that comes into that category here. All right. Now, more information is surfacing about this malware that was used to attack Kaspersky and spy on the hotels where the Iranian nuclear negotiators were staying. It is based on the Duku malware, which is already known to have been a joint U.S.-Israeli malware to attack Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Israel is still denying it, of course. And there's a new wrinkle about this that we need to look at as soon as we come back from these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about the new version of the Duku malware from Israel and the U.S. They're calling it Duku 2.0. And it was used to try and break into Kaspersky Labs to basically derail them from their examination of the use of this same malware to spy on the hotels where the negotiators for the P5+1 deal were staying, break into their communications. We're now finding out, story from the Register over in Great Britain, the reason Duku 2.0 is going where it goes is apparently it is using legitimate digital certificates issued by VeriSign, which is a trusted certificate root, which means the malware shows up with this trusted certificate from VeriSign, and your computer will just happily bring it on in and load it without setting off any alarms. Nasty stuff. Now, online password wallet business LastPass announced they have suffered a network security breach, and it's advising their users to change their account passwords. Now, frankly, I view the idea of using an online password repository as incredibly stupid for reasons that have to be obvious now. It's obviously open to hacking, certainly by the NSA, which is trying to get everybody's passwords for everything that they're doing. Now, last week we were starting to see a PR campaign by the nation's police officers to try and recapture the sympathy and support of the American public. You don't know what we're having to deal with. We're doing all this stuff. And we'd really love to believe that the police are all about to protect and to serve. And there are a lot of good police officers. Let's be clear about this. Their reputation and image are being spoiled by an unfortunately large segment of the police force which behaves rather poorly. So we're talking about this story out of Santa Ana where the police raided a medical marijuana dispensary. trashed the place, destroyed the security video recorder to cover their tracks, not realizing there was a second system. They were caught on video helping themselves to some of the marijuana goodies in the cases, playing darts. And the big scandal about this is that Santa Ana passed a law saying that they were only going to allow so many medical marijuana dispensaries. The permits were issued by lottery. And this place didn't have one of those permits, but the law was under legal challenge. There was a restraining order against its enforcement, but the police came in and trashed this place as being an unpermitted medical marijuana facility. And the reason seems to be because a member of the city council, a city official, had financial interest in a competing permitted medical marijuana dispensary. So he sent the cops over to trash his competition on the basis of a law not legally in effect at the time. See, grand jury indicts Virginia officer that shot mentally ill man 9 times. More and more stuff here. Florida cop shoots dead homeless man in front of 50 children attending summer school. That's going to be a little traumatic for them, I think, here. Judge has ruled there is enough evidence to charge Cleveland officers in the death of Tamir Rice. And here's a very interesting story. Over in Missouri, there was a Highway Patrol officer who criticized the department. This is coming out of the story where a handcuffed man fell into the water and drowned because the life-preserving jacket hadn't been fastened on him correctly. And the Highway Patrol officer who criticized the department actually got more harshly punished than the officer who failed to secure the life vest on the dead man. So, anyway, let's see. The resulting Highway Patrol officer has been demoted to corporal and relocated from Lake of the Ozarks, where he's been a regular fixture for 3 decades. Guy's a 30-year veteran. Now, as you know, we had a shooting incident down in Dallas. A lot of people were wondering, was it a PR stunt to build sympathy for the police? We're now hearing that the shooter, James Boulware, launched an assault with explosives and weapons against the Dallas Police Department just after midnight on Friday, and hours later he was killed by a police sniper. Apparently, information has surfaced that he wanted to attack the police because they had taken his child. And we have been seeing an epidemic all across the country of these various child protective services taking kids for the flimsiest of reasons. Oh, you let him play in your front yard for an hour and a half without supervision. Take the kid. Oh, he's not getting the right vaccines. We're going to take the kid. Now, police have come up with a new term called excited delirium. They've made it up to basically account for hundreds of deaths of people in their custody. They're suffering excited delirium. It's their fault they're dead here. Yes, they were being tased and hogtied and choked and sat on and everything, but they only died because they had excited delirium. That's their new excuse here. Apparently, country singer Randy Howard was shot and killed during an altercation with a bounty hunter. And the bounty hunter was also shot. He will survive. One of the things I did like about Dog the Bounty Hunter is they don't use firearms. Of course, Dog himself can't. Having served time in prison, he's not allowed to have a weapon. But they do the peaceful approach to this thing here. All right, let's see. More evidence. Cities that are anti-gun are collapsing into runaway murder hubs. When you ban law-abiding citizens from having guns, crime explodes. There has never been an exception to that rule. The gun grabbers are having a celebratory day. Colt Arms has filed for bankruptcy. Apparently, they lost a major military contract on which they were dependent. There was some other regulatory issues. They missed a filing deadline, had to pay a fine for that, and so Colt is now going into bankruptcy, and the gun grabbers are saying, "Yee-haw, we got one here." Here's a bizarre story. I couldn't believe this. Okay, there's an English teacher who is a feminist, and she wrote an editorial in the Washington Post. She's in Sacramento, saying she refuses to teach Shakespeare because he's white, he's male, and he's dead anyway. That tells you a lot about the current state of education in this country. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about education and this Sacramento teacher who refuses to teach Shakespeare because he's white, he's male, and he's dead. And over in Great Britain, they're starting to monitor their school kids, little tiny grade school kids, with anti-radicalization software so they won't be drawn into terrorism. Well, nobody's drawn into terrorism. They're driven into terrorism by abusive government. Over at the University of Waterloo, there's a feminist professor, Naila Khaleda May, is teaching a course on Beyonce, and basically decided to teach the course because Beyonce has come out and said she aligns herself with feminism. So we have this feminist professor creates a course to study feminist Beyonce. Tell me, how is this going to stop the objectification of women as sex objects, which I was told is a big part of the feminist agenda? And then we wonder why our college graduates can't actually find any useful jobs. All right, we're going to take 2 more phone calls and then get back to some other news here. I'm going to start here with Gus in Missouri. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Mike. I've got a question for it. Do you think or know if the Ashkenazi Khazar Jews have been in control of Germany since the end of World War II?
I don't know if we can say an absolute in control, but there's absolutely no question that they wield a tremendous amount of influence in Germany's government, in the U.S. government, the Canadian government, the British government, and so forth and so on. I don't think that that's debatable at this point.
I was wondering about compared to the United States, like they control us. Think it's that bad?
I don't really know. I don't have enough information to state. I think we can take one indicator from the fact that Germany is at the forefront of criminalization of any debate about Israel and Palestine and any questioning about the actual history of World War II. So I would say on those measures alone, definitely yes.
Well, there's a prophecy from some of the churches that I've read that Israel's going to ask Germany for help in the coming years, and they're going to try and say they'll do it.
There already are. Germany's been giving Israel nuclear weapon-capable submarines for years now. Anyway, listen, I got to let you go. We got a bunch of calls, and I need to get through because we're running out of time on the show today. We're going to switch over to Mo in Florida. Whoops. Oh, I'm Mo. I am sorry. I hit the wrong button here. We're going to go to Arash in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing? Thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to ask you a quick question because I know you have other calls on the line. I was wondering what's your opinion on this towards a cashless society, because I'm sure it's going to be detrimental to our way of living. Like, what do you think about that?
Well, as I've mentioned before, I think that it's not going to work. It sounds good. The bankers would love to have a system where all the money is in their banks so they can play games with it, but there's too much of our real economy that requires a certain degree of cash and anonymity, whether it's organized crime, CIA drug running, and like I said, you know, what would politicians tuck into the G-string of the strippers if they didn't have cash?
Yeah, that's true. But I'm thinking, will they create like a 2-tier system whereby like the general population will be cashless and the people above it might have an advantage to having access to cash? Do you think that will happen?
Yeah, I think inevitably the rich are always going to have a separate little isolated system for themselves that we're not supposed to know about, so that they can go on out and, go on out and molest small children, which you can't do that without you got cash in your pocket. Okay? All right. I got to let you go here. We're going to go to Mo in Florida. Mo, I'm sorry I hit the wrong button before. What's on your mind?
Hey, first of all, Michael, thank you for taking my call. And I must say, if you don't mind some constructive criticism, you're like the worst pitch man I've ever seen in my life.
Okay.
No, I mean that in a good way. You're all about the truth.
Yes.
Well, listen, I apologize if I missed it on the show. I was catching bits and pieces. We just moved. And have you had a chance to look at that new, I don't know if the Senate bill, whatever, where they're trying to pass this gun safety law where you have to have fingerprint recognition or ID recognition. Are you on top of that one?
Yeah, well, I was looking at that. I don't think it's going to go anywhere because the bill is calling for a retrofit, meaning all the guns that are out there now have to have this government-approved computer chip put in them. What's called smart gun technology, where the gun won't function unless you're wearing this little ring or some other such nonsense. And, of course, what this does is it puts a system into all the guns that the government can jam whenever they want, just like they can shut down all the cell phones and cell phone cameras whenever they want. I'm absolutely convinced this smart gun technology is not about protecting gun users, but about putting something inside the gun where the government flips the switch someplace and the guns all stop working. And, I'm rather hard-pressed how I'm going to fit that into a flintlock myself.
Hey, the British would have loved that one, huh?
Oh, absolutely they would have loved that one. Absolutely they would have loved that one.
Thanks, Mike. I love you, man. Bye.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to close the phone lines for the rest of the show. I got a bunch of stuff here to talk about. A little bit of good news from the universe. The Philae lander that landed on the comet last November has awakened from its slumber. Now, when the lander hit the comet, the anchoring system misfired, and Philae basically bounced across the low-gravity comet, came to rest in a shady spot, and because of that, the batteries ran down after 60 hours, and they lost contact with it. As of this weekend, Philae has awakened. Its batteries are charged up enough. It's starting to send data. Some of it is time-stamped from a while ago, so they're thinking that the lander has actually been awake for a while, but only just now got enough power to start sending data back, and they're overjoyed. And as it turns out, there's a little bit of an upside to this situation, because had the lander stayed where they originally put it down, by now, as the comet gets closer to the sun, it would have cooked the electronics. Now it's in the shade. It's only getting a little bit of sun, and they're saying that it's now likely to be alive and working during the most interesting part of the comet's journey, which is when it gets close to the sun and starts spraying out the tail. We could actually see venting from inside the comet flip the lander back off into space, but we'll see what's going on. But I'm glad they got that back, and it's working, and we're waiting to see pictures and stuff coming on down from that. Over in southwest Greenland, the record cold temperatures continue. Remember, almost 20 years ago, head of Greenpeace said, by 20 years, Greenland will have lost all of its ice. And then he was forced to actually admit in a TV interview that, no, they didn't really think that, but they weren't going to sell this whole global warming nonsense unless they scared people into agreement here. By the way, for those of you who follow ABC News, the Food Lion Network, back in 2008, ABC News predicted that by June of 2015, New York City would be underwater from human-caused global warming. I telephoned a friend in New York. They're not underwater this morning. Okay. And then the ABC wonders why nobody trusts them anymore with this kind of stuff. All right. Let's see. Behind the scenes of the largest annual meeting of global warming contrarians. And this was a hit piece over in Mashable.com, where they're out there saying, oh, these kooks who don't believe in human-caused global warming, they got into a convention. We should have just boarded them up and left them in there. They're really getting desperate because they know the hoax is falling apart, courtesy of Mother Nature. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today on this Monday, and we're talking about this hit piece that came out basically trying to smear and trash the two-day International Climate Change Conference that took place in Washington, D.C., describing the attendees as mainly old white guys. Like, that's going to have a factor on it. And what's really interesting is in this article, the author of this piece goes on, but basically they're trashing anybody who refuses to admire the emperor's new warming. And they actually say in the article that solar output is not a factor in human-caused global warming, as if turning off the sun completely would only be a minor inconvenience. But, I mean, that is how desperate these global warming people are getting to try and somehow get us to buy this lemon, drink the Kool-Aid, whatever euphemism you want to have. They're really scared. There is a huge amount of money at stake in carbon taxes and carbon credits. Subservience to a global environmental authority is a key part of the Agenda 21 program. And they're still out there screaming, the world is getting warmer and it's your fault. To the point where, for a while during these record-setting winters we've been having, they were saying, well, there's a global warming pause, there's a hiatus. Now they're out there with articles saying that there wasn't even a pause. Our numbers show that warming has continued unabated. It's accelerating. If you don't do what we tell you to do right this second, you will all be dying. So, and let them go on screaming, because they're just making themselves look more and more ridiculous. Down in Indonesia, Mount Sinabung is continuing to erupt. They have had 28 pyroclastic flows just today, which is very dangerous. They're evacuating the area around the base of the volcano. There are signs that a lava dome is building up at the top, which, if it collapses, means there'll be a huge, very rapidly moving flow of lava. Not that rapid, because the lava in that part of the world is very heavy and very thick. That's why they get the strata volcanoes, the really tall, peaky type ones. Keeping an eye on this, because Sinabung could very easily be a side vent of the magma chamber for the Toba supervolcano, which is even larger than Yellowstone. It's not as well known. And we want to keep an eye on that. If that were to blow, all of this nonsense about global warming and war and economics and stuff would basically be moot. We would have much, much bigger problems. Over in Japan, Mount Sakurajima is still rumbling around, and the Nishi-no-shima volcano is building new landmass. It's always the upside of a volcano, is you're getting new land created in the ocean. Every time Kilauea erupts, the real estate agents are down there on that south shore with the signs ready to pluck down and say, new beachfront property for sale. Doing it with, there's a vent off the southern shore of the Big Island. It's going to be the new Hawaiian Islands at some point in the far distant future. Unfortunately, it had a recent event where it lost the top one-third of itself in an undersea landslide, so it's going to be longer than that here. German companies are stopping the sales of Roundup products, and again, because of concern of glyphosate. They're very worried about it. It is now acknowledged as a carcinogen. Here in the United States of America, Congressman Pompeo is proposing an amendment to the DARK Act that would preempt any state or county laws regulating genetically engineered crops in any way, shape, or form. So this is the latest incarnation of the Monsanto Protection Act. All these other countries are banning this stuff as dangerous. Here in the U.S., you will eat your GMO slop and you will like it, because the FDA is shutting down all the artisanal natural food producers. You will be dependent on the giant corporation. Suspected mad cow disease means crisis for U.S. sale of Irish beef. Not really. Don't forget, Congress has just removed country of origin labeling from meat products, which means if you are buying pieces of cow from Ireland, you don't know that. It's another way of trying to defeat the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, because that also applies to Israel. Israeli products don't have to be labeled as being from Israel or the occupied territories anymore. Meanwhile, and this is how bizarre it gets, up in Oregon, there is a grass-fed rancher who has been hit with criminal charges for grazing his animals. Okay? And the excuse for this, the Union County Sheriff's Department issued a search and seizure warrant because some of their animals died over an extended period of time. And the next day they confiscated all their livestock on the grounds of criminal neglect because some of the cows died while grazing in pastures. Now, I'm a farm kid myself. When you are on a farm, you will lose animals from time to time. That's just a reality. And the crime here seems to be that the farmers were feeding their animals grass instead of buying commercially produced and approved animal feed from agribusiness. That's the only thing. Criminal neglect? I don't think so. You do lose animals in farms. When I was a kid, I had an incubator to raise our own chicks. And every run of the incubator, we would lose, 10-15% of the eggs wouldn't hatch. And you don't know why, but it's not criminal neglect. It's just the reality of life on a farm. Apparently, the African-American community is now in high dudgeon over the new mandatory vaccination law, drawing a parallel between this, what they see as experimentation on the population, and the Tuskegee syphilis study. And that may be a bit of a reach, but it's not unrealistic. I don't think it's that extreme. Meanwhile, a boy over in Great Britain, Ian Duncan Smith, has just been awarded £120,000 in damages because the swine flu vaccination left him severely disabled by narcolepsy. He cannot stay awake for any long amount of time. And we need to get these stories out there. By the way, a little bit of good news. There was a story a while back in New Jersey where a nurse was fired from her job at a hospital for refusing a flu vaccination without having a recognized religious or medical exemption. And she was denied unemployment benefits because she had been fired rather than let go. Well, the New Jersey Appeals Court said the firing was illegitimate. She's entitled to the unemployment benefits. And basically said that this idea of firing people for refusing a flu shot is unconstitutionally discriminatory. Anyway, let's see. Medicare paid for nearly 40 million tranquilizer prescriptions in 2013. That's how doped up and mellow we are all being kept. And on top of that, here's a very alarming story from American Free Press. Professor Peter Goch basically came out with a study saying that mental health studies are rigged to support the pharmaceutical industries, and there are 500,000 deaths every year of people 65 years and older directly attributable to the overuse of antidepressant and antipsychotic medications in America and Europe. It's all about the money. That's how they're going to solve the retirement crisis. We'll just kill them all off and say it's good for them. All right, there's the music. I got to get out of here and do Jim Goddard's show, and we'll be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical, stay angry. Call your members of Congress tonight and tell them not to pass the Trade Assistant Act tomorrow. Just stop this fast-track nonsense right now. That's your homework. You get a gold star if you make a phone call. Talk to you tomorrow. Aloha, America.